Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how I'm making my very special 60th birthday family quilt. It'll be very unique. There won't be another like it. So I'm going to show you how I went about doing it. So the first thing I did was cut out to begin with, about 20 squares like this. They're 9.5 inches by 9.5 inches, and they're just a plain cream cotton. And I gave them out to most of my family members, and I said, please, could you do something on this square that says something about you? You can sew, you can use fabric pens, embroidery, applique, knit, crochet, do whatever you like, so long as it fits on this square. So that's what I did, and I waited, and I waited, and eventually they started to come back. And I got things like this. I don't know how well you can see that, but that is, I think it's Korean 3D embroidery. I didn't do it. It was done by my daughter-in-law. She'd never done it before, and I thought that was brilliant. So that's one. And then my son, he likes gardening. So these are actually tomatoes, not cherries. A few people thought they were cherries, but they're actually tomatoes. So he did that. This is a working process, but this was another son of mine. He likes chameleons. Ooh, so he's done a chameleon. When he gets back from his holiday, he's going to finish that one. Okay, so there's a few. Oh, here's another one to show you this one. This one was done by my mum, and that's embroidered. Let me see. Okay, just for that's one my sister knitted, and another sister used the felt pens that I supplied. These are pens that you iron and then they're permanent. You draw on it, then you iron it and it stays permanent. I may go over and highlight a few things with embroidery on these ones because next to something like that, they don't really stand out very much. So anyway, oh, I even did the dogs. There's one dog, Bertie. Another two dogs somewhere. Can't find them right now. But anyway, now this one here I've done. And this was for my dad, who sadly is no longer with us. But he used to like shooting. And this is actually a target practice back from 1964 when I was just 1 year old. And there's where his bullets hit. I don't know much about shooting, but anyway, he liked his guns. So that I don't like guns. So rather than putting a gun on it, I thought that the target practice was a really good idea. Just 1 second, I will show you. And so this was the actual target practice. You can see. 1964, May 1964 to be precise. And so I've kind of copied his handwriting to the best I could. And that's that. It's one of my favourite ones. That's the idea. So each person does one of these, and then eventually I get to join them all together. But as well as that, I've also done family names. So this is my name, my family name, very common Smith, never mind. And my mum and my brother and sisters are all on here. Our names, I got them to write their name with a friction pen, and then I embroidered over it. So that's all our family. Get another one. There's another one, and so on. Lots of different ones, lots of different family names. And the idea is that I will do, so like this is the Smith family, and all of the squares done by the Smith family will go alongside this, and each one of those will be followed by one of these. We start off with a 4-patch square, and each of the squares to make up the 4-patch is 5 inches by 5 inches, and you need 4 of them. I regret this, I think, possibly now, but I chose to do low value pieces because I wanted these pieces that I gave to people to do to be the start of the show and not these. So I went with fairly low value ones. But what I wanted to do originally was do, let me show you this. Let's do, so I don't know if you can see that. That was the original order that I wanted them, but I changed and I went with 4 different squares, all low value, so that these could be the star of the show. Anyway, so that's what I did, and these are what I've got back, and to be honest, I'm very pleased. This one was done by my brother. He likes to travel. In fact, he's pretty much always on holiday. Anyway, so that's that. So the first thing we're going to do is to make up our 4 patch, or our 4 patches. Altogether, I'm doing, it's going to be 9 squares by 9 squares. I made 38 4 patch squares, which ended up 9.5 by 9.5, and then I gave out 20 squares, and then I kept another 20 squares for myself, which I used for all the family names, and there were a few people who didn't want to do their own squares, so I used those to make other people's squares. And the 3 squares that were remaining were made into our family banner. Let's get started with putting our 4 patch pieces together, and obviously I had a lot to do, so I chain pieced them all. So I'm just going to show you me chain piecing them all together. I will do, or I'm sure I've got somewhere, a separate video on chain piecing 4 patch squares. If I haven't, I will do one shortly and put that on my channel. Anyway, let's get started. Here my squares are already sorted into piles of the top row and the bottom row. So I'm able to take the top 2 squares, which will be a left and a right of the top row, and sew, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I sew down all of my pairs, forming a long chain. This is called chain piecing. They're all sewn together with the normal 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and you just keep adding to your chain, going a couple of extra stitches over the end of each of your pieces, and then feed your next piece under your presser foot and carry on sewing until you've done all of one row. Then, using a pair of snips or a small pair of scissors, separate all of your rows. And then I like to set all the seams first, and then press my seams to the right for my top row and to the left for my bottom row. Continue pressing all your seams to either the left or the right until you finish pressing all of your pieces. Then you can join your top row to your second row by matching up the centres and either pinning or clipping in place. I'm using clips, but you could use pins if you wanted to. If you've pressed correctly, the seams should nest together nicely, like this. Then at your sewing machine, sew your rows together, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. No need to back tack at the start and the finish, and again you can chain piece if you wish to. Then you can press your seams and you're ready to trim down your squares if you wish to. At this stage, I probably shouldn't have done, but I trimmed mine down to 9 inches. 4.5, yes, 9. So I put the 4.5 mark on my ruler at the centre of my square, and I trimmed them all down to 9 inches. There was a reason for this, because there was a bit of mistake with some of the squares that I gave out, and they didn't all measure the 9.5 inches. So I ended up having to cut everything down to 9 inches, but I probably would have been best to have trimmed them down once I put the backing on, because they're going to be even smaller by the time I've backed them all. Anyway, that's another step which we will come to later, because I was going to make it in the normal way. I was going to join all of my squares together and then put my backing on the one big quilt and use someone else's sewing machine with a bigger throat than mine
to quilt, but in the end I decided that I wanted to do it all at home on my sewing machine, so I'm going to do it as a quilt as you go. So you'll see how I do that later, but for now I'm going to leave it here where I'm just trimming all of my 4-patch squares down to 9 inches, and then next week we will carry on. But for now, here's a bit of a sneak preview of how it will eventually look. I've changed the order of things several times over the last few weeks, and this is not how it ends up, but this is a start of how it will look, and I've done a few more squares since here. But that's a bit of an idea for you of how my quilt will eventually look.